Welcome to the Health Science Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and the podcast is sponsored by the National Health Association. And I'm very pleased today to have as my guest Dr. Joel Kahn. Dr. Kahn is a holistic cardiologist, member of the American College of Cardiology, an adjunct professor at Wayne State University Med School, has a long history in the vegan world, and is the founder and director of the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity in Bingham Farms, Michigan. Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education. I'm so pleased to welcome you today, Dr. Kahn. How are you? How's it going?
Thank you. I'm actually extremely excited to talk to all the amazing NHA family because they're the best. So thank you.
Well, I noticed in looking at your bio that you were turned on to vegan and plant-based living. Actually, it says as an undergraduate. Is that correct? When you were in your teenage years?
Yeah, unlike you, I didn't grow up with Sicilian and Puglia background. I grew up Jewish background, keeping kosher. I didn't do the cheeseburger or the pork thing. And when I arrived at the University of Michigan in 1977, 45 years ago, I figured out real quick, it looks like it's going to be a salad bar for me. It was just a purely impulse reaction. And that's what I did. And very interestingly, just to talk about me, my parents around the same year went to the Pritikin Center in Santa Monica for no special reason. They had some friends that really advised them it's a great place for a week or two. And my mother came back and said, we're having lentil loaf on Friday night. It used to be meatloaf. So I'm eating salad bar Monday through Friday, and the occasional weekend I ran home 40 minutes to my suburban Detroit parents. They were doing squash, for an entree. So it became apparent real quick. My mother was an excellent cook that you can survive. And I then, ran into John Robbins and Dean Ornish and Nathan Pritikin and other pioneers in terms of running into them in books and literature.
Yeah, well, we'll get in. So you went right into the vegan Shabbat. That's what happened, right?
So that's pretty much the case. There's no beeswax candles, but we so totally honor a vegan Shabbat.
Well, let me ask you this then. Taking that, you had that early exposure. So now you're going to go into medical school. You made that decision. So now you're going into the medical world. So you carried that consciousness into your medical training. Is that correct?
I did. It was frankly awkward. Ann Arbor was pretty friendly. There were Indian restaurants, a couple Middle Eastern restaurants. The dorm worked okay. And I was, out of the dorm in 2 years, had my own place. I trained, most of my training was in Dallas and Kansas City, probably two of the most steak-friendly cities in the United States. I mean, KC, Masterpiece Steak and Barbecue Sauce. That was a little tricky. I have many, many dinners that were just okra at the VA hospital in Dallas. Everybody else was eating hot dogs. I was eating okra. I think I won. I think in retrospect, that was a much better choice. And a few other really challenging days in the early 80s of trying to find a meal. I mean, it was always Wendy's, get a plain baked potato, and very few other choices if you're traveling.
How did you organize, let's go, how did you organize your mindset now having that kind of information, a little bit of that background, and deal with the medical education as you were being exposed to it? How was that for you in those early years of your life?
Well, the famous statement is men are great at compartmentalizing. So, I studied my biochemistry and I studied my pharmacology and I did my anatomy and then my clinical rotations. It was a separate life. What I chose to eat, breakfast, lunch, dinner, for the rare exception of maybe a hospital dinner where I had to call ahead and arrange some special meals. it was a separate life. And that ended in 1985, 86, when John Robbins' book, A Diet for a New America, came out. And I really, frankly, did not fully understand, even though by 1985, 86, I was done with med school. I was finishing residency and starting fellowship. But that book so laid out the health consequences, the animal rights issues, the environmental issues. And I saw like a light bulb went off. I probably down the road can teach people that this is a therapy. And that was cemented 4 years later when Dean Ornish published The Lifestyle Heart Trial in 1990. I literally had just finished my fellowship 2 weeks before that paper was published, 3 weeks. July 21, 1990. Go look me up. I was sitting and reading my journals, and I said, holy guacamole, literally. Plant-based diets are a therapy of power equivalent to medication and procedures. And I know a lot about plant-based diets. I just never combined the two. So
the work that Ornish did, the work that Esselstyn did on reversing heart disease, these things informed a lot of where you went next in terms of your own dance, in terms of your own journey, would you say?
Yeah, they did. I mean, I was completely plant-based for all those years. And when the Lifestyle Heart Trial, 1990, was published, I said, you know what? If I have 1 minute in the office, the best time to educate a patient, because I was a pretty big kahuna cath lab guy. I could do your heart catheterization. I could do your angioplasty. I could do your stent. My fingers were just like really fast, and my brain finger coordination was pretty good. I'm a retired cath lab guy, but I did that for a long time. The best time to educate a patient about nutrition is when you got a needle in their body. They really pay attention. So I did a lot of good when those 2-3 minutes of numbing up and getting access to their arterial system, and then having to focus at that point on their angioplasty or their catheterization. But I taught them all. It's not bacon, eggs, and cheese. It's oatmeal, greens, and beans. And a lot of them listened. I mean, I caught them in a vulnerable time. I apologize for those. I abused the privilege. I taught them some ways to not allow me to do another procedure on them. It was self-damaging, but it was the right thing to do.
The word holistic has been thrown around a lot. It's kind of a high-level abstraction. It kind of dissolves into people's minds into so many things. And you advertise yourself as a holistic cardiologist. Let's talk about how that is, what that is, so it's really kind of clear to people listening to you.
Yeah, and there's terms. Holistic is one. Integrative, taking the entirety of the picture. Preventive usually means drugs. I don't interpret preventive as drugs, but it's still good. Functional medicine, functional chiropractic, functional cardiology. I think they're all interchangeable. The best line, of course, I have to credit Mark Hyman, is a holistic doctor sees a patient with a whole list of problems and a whole list of medications that you're going to work hard to get off of. And really, it's a root cause analysis. My friends that are engineers tell me, you guys aren't good at asking the question why. And that should be your first question. Why is my cholesterol up? Why is my blood pressure up? Why do I have plaque in my arteries? Why do I have a heart attack, a stroke? Why do I have congestive heart failure? Dig deep, genetics, infection, environment, lifestyle, toxins, lab values, and the rest, and dig deep and figure out why. And then you have a chance to get right down at the root cause and maybe correct the problem so it doesn't continue to be such a detriment.
Well, let me touch on that, because when you're dealing with patients, so a person comes in, how does Dr. Kahn, the holistic cardiologist, start that process? And how do you see and how do you find your people that you're working with comply with those kind of recommendations when sometimes they come in with a preconceived notion as to what a medical doctor is supposed to do in a medical practice? How do you bridge that? How does it work for you?
Yeah, well, I spend an hour with a new patient and half an hour to an hour in a follow-up. It's usually enough time. People bring no records or they bring 10 hours worth of records. It can be a challenge, and whatever they bring, I'm happy to, review. There's a little free conversation. I've got to gain their trust and have a little connection. And I really ask the question, why did you come here? What are you looking for? What's your purpose here? But then I have a list of questions, and for most of them, they've never been asked this before. A lot's on diet. What's breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks? What's your emotional eating? Why, do you have a problem with various dietary issues? A lot on fitness, a lot on alcohol, a lot on stress, a lot on trauma in your life, a lot on your dental history, family history, of course, in great detail. Vitamins that they're taking, of course. I want to gauge. I do a little quick quiz. Do you know who Ornish is? Do you know who Esselstyn is? If you ever read the China study, and I get these people that have had 2 or 3 heart operations, and I go through that quiz in 30 seconds, and it's pretty obvious their biggest deficiency is not vitamin D, it's education. So I can be powerful with my online videos and get them up to speed, and see if they're open-minded about making changes. My last patient in the office today, just not a clue what has been called acluistic, not a clue that there's a food disease nexus. So we're going to start slow. Watch Forks Over Knives, listen to a podcast, read a book. Depends on what your best route for learning is. And I ask people how they learn most. And this guy is a video guy, so he's going to watch Forks Over Knives, What the Hell, Game Changers, and maybe we'll throw in a few others. Always with a spouse, if there's a spouse.
So you have to tiptoe around what they're able to handle in that moment so they can move forward kind of move the needle forward in their lives. So if it's medication, you'll monitor that and work toward the direction of trying to get them on less of that and that kind of thing, using nutrition and lifestyle approaches. Is that it?
Right. And, there's people like the audience probably listening to this. They get it. They get that food is medicine, and they get that there's the power of avoiding and minimizing and maybe eliminating medication with real rigorous diets, lifestyles. It's more than diet. Diet's a huge portion. You got to get your sleep, and you got to manage your stress, and you got to get your fitness. You got to have your nutrition, and maybe incorporate some fasting and it's a lot. It's frankly, it's quite a big menu actually overall. Fit some infrared sauna in if you can. And then I get other people that don't have a clue, like I mentioned. And I'm kind of gentle with them at the beginning. I mean, they don't know me. They don't know that they have to trust me. So my last patient today, I would have liked to have grabbed them and said, you're 50 pounds overweight. You've got erectile dysfunction. You've got evidence of coronary artery disease. You're in your mid 50s. I don't think your pork sausage and your eggs and your turkey wrap with Caesar dressings working for you, but I can't do that in an hour and leave that patient with nothing. They're going to go home and, okay, so I'm going to starve for the next 4 weeks till I see him back. So that's why I'll get my database going the first visit, and then I'll circle back. Did you do your homework? Did you watch those videos, listen to a podcast, read a book? Sometimes I hate to do it. I have to assign a spouse to be the queen or king of education, because I just get a sense that person's not really open-minded at that point. But, and then what's amazing is the 1 month follow-up. Sometimes people who came from nowhere, they're down 20 pounds or having oatmeal and greens and bean soup, and they totally got it. 1 or 2 videos, maybe read a book. And then there's those that are just not yet ready. There's something that's been called the
Well, look, we know that people are digging their graves with their teeth in many, many instances.
Right.
My experience in practice was always, early on, because you get so fired up, what's going to really help, and you want everybody to kind of make that change. And I know early in my career, it was almost so preachy that I wound up, I think, possibly turning people off to a path that they might have taken if it was a little bit more gentle. So through the years, it became trying to teach people where they were at so that they can make the transitions, they could make the substitutions that can kind of help them move the needle. Have you seen something like that in your own practice, that mentality?
Yeah, absolutely. There's it's a famous statement by anthropologist Margaret Mead. It's easier to change a man's religion than it is to change their diet. And that's something that I've always considered. Go slow, get your database, build some trust, build some education, and then we'll go in for the bullseye on the second or the third visit, if they're willing. There are some people that you can offer them the Powerball winnings, and they're going to have eggs and bacon every morning. It's just something about the way they were raised makes them comfort. But we got to work with them too. But usually it's the second or the third visit we really get success. And it's amazing. You know it. I know it. I see it all the time. Weight's down, inflammation's down, joints feel better, sleep's better, energy levels up. I have a very, I call it precision medicine clinic. I want you to feel better, and I want your weight to be optimal. I want your blood pressure to be optimal. But I'm a numeric. I'm not an engineer, but that's what we're doing. How's your carotid plaque, and how's it improving over time? How's your coronary plaque? How's it improving over time? How's the really important blood tests like inflammation and vitamin levels? And obviously, if it's a patient with atherosclerosis, how's your LDL cholesterol and another version called lipoprotein(a) cholesterol? So it's a lot of data driven. It's not just touchy feely. It's real benchmarks. Are we moving forward?
In terms of your background and training, how was your interaction with the body of medicine, other physicians that, kind of frown on the idea that you're stepping out of the box? Like, for example, we know that we're spending almost $4 trillion on what's called healthcare, when in fact it's disease management. It's not really healthcare. It's really kind of giving people things that can lower, deal with the symptom expression of what they're dealing with, keep their blood pressure lower, rather than getting at cause, as you mentioned. So when we want to move the needle into true healthcare and away from disease management, there is, the old famous Scottish psychiatrist R.D. Laing used to talk about the discipline of unlearning. How do you find that happening within the profession itself? I know there's lifestyle medicine. I know there's things moving forward. How do you see that over the course of the time that you've been practicing, to see that the doctors embracing that little bit of discipline of unlearning to make way for more evidence-based stuff that we now know is very valuable?
Yeah, it's happening, but it never happens quick enough. And as you say, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and other organizations that didn't exist 15 years ago and now have conferences with a few thousand people. But I don't know the statistic, but how many cardiology fellows are we reaching that are really turned on by preventive cardiology, which is an amazing and wonderful and gratifying field. And it's small. We still got our financial ties. Procedures win. You can use your brain for an hour. You can do a procedure in 10 minutes and get paid 10 times more doing a procedure in 10 minutes than using your brain to carefully work with a complex patient. It's just the way it is. But it is slowly changing in a system where reimbursement's falling at all. So, I mean, I've been an odd man out for a long time, although I had, hospital privileges and a university professorship and was academically very involved. First it was my diet, then it was my contrarian nature to ask questions. And then obviously during the pandemic, asking questions was considered no longer appropriate, which first time in my medical career, we used to debate. I was on Joe Rogan's show. That's not exactly academic medicine, but I debated an opponent for almost 4 hours in 2018. I mean, that's the nature of medicine. The most popular events at the American College of Cardiology used to be a debate. I used to be part of it. Stent versus medicine, stents versus balloon. But, in the last 3 years, you basically have a mantra, which is fed to us by the CDC and the NIH and the World Health Organization. And, I don't exist anymore on Twitter, for example, because I spoke up a bit too much about various thoughts, some of which were cardiology, some of which weren't cardiology. Everything's about patient care and patient wellness. So, I mean, it's an odd time. I am actually optimistic that there's a lot of young physicians, physician assistants, nurse practitioners that at least have heard the word lifestyle medicine, dietary medicine, fitness medicine, sleep medicine. And even, again, in my prior life to where I had a clinic completely dedicated to preventive medicine, I mean, 1 or 2 minutes with a patient out of 20 or 15, just whispering, be a forks over knife whisper, just whisper that word, watch that video. It can be transformative because people that are ready, they just want a little, door to open. People that aren't ready, you can spend 2 hours with them, nothing's going to happen. So Never underestimate the power of a patient to change quickly if you give them some credible information, and then let them decide.
I'm here with Dr. Joel Kahn, holistic, vegan, plant-based cardiologist. We're going to take a few more moments to have a few words from our sponsor, the National Health Association. And now, to put a smile on the sponsors of the National Health Association, you're listening to the Health Science Podcast Show. I want to remind you to visit the National Health Association website, where you'll find incredible resources to support your healthy lifestyle, including plant-exclusive eating without added salt, oil, and sugar. Simply go to healthscience.org or nationalhealthassociation.org. Be sure to check out membership, which is $35 per year for those living within the U.S. and $55 for those living outside the U.S. You'll be amazed at all the information and benefits you'll receive. As a member, you're kept up to date on the latest evidence-based tools for health promotion. You'll receive the incomparable quarterly magazine, Health Science, a beautiful 40-page advertising-free publication mailed to your home or offices, loaded with articles, recipes, inspirational stories, and interviews with world leaders in the fields of personal health, plant-based nutrition, water-only fasting, animal rights, and environmental support. And you'll receive details about life-changing events, such as the 2023 NHA Conference set for June 23 to the 25th, 2023 in Cleveland, Ohio, which will be the NHA's 75th annual NHA Conference. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and now back to the show. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Frank Sabatino, the host of the Health Science Podcast. I'm with Dr. Joel Kahn. People like Ken Williams have made the statement, and I love the statement, there's only two kinds of cardiologists: plant-based cardiologists and cardiologists that don't know the literature. So let's talk a little bit about the evidence base that drives you, that really informs the kinds of things that you do. What are the striking pieces that really are important to you, that you embrace, and how do you keep up with what's going on in that literature and in that evidence base?
Yeah, I really do talk a lot to my patients about the science. And of course, that term has been sort of dirtied in the last 3 years because of the head of our National Institute of Aging and Infectious Disease declaring he was the science. And I don't think anybody is the science. Science changes, science fluxes, science gets debated. We got taught in med school, you've heard the term, that, sorry to tell you, 50% of what you learned in med school isn't right, but we don't know which 50%. So become a good student for life. And I do believe that's correct. I am a student of science. I go over to pubmed.gov every day and I search my field, what's new in preventive cardiology. It's a quick, easy process. I might have a focused question, something new about coenzyme Q10, something new about lipoprotein little a cholesterol, but it might be just a general view. I have a lot of Google alerts for a variety of topics that interest me: preventive cardiology, reversal of heart disease, hypertension, atherosclerosis, vegan diets, and all the rest. I have my own podcast. I write an email to my patients every week. I write an email to 20,000 physicians every week. All of these are based on scientific experiments. And it's exciting. I mean, there's so much new stuff all the time. But the basics still are, did you get 7 to 8 hours sleep? Did you get some amount of fitness in your life? As much natural movement during the day. I have a treadmill desk in my office. I walk about 10 miles a day while I'm seeing patients. It's awkward. It tires me, but I look like an old Italian farmer in Sardinia, which is what I want to retire to be one day. I bring my lunch in a glass bowl rather than a plastic container, and I don't microwave it. And, you got to live the part. So I think you have to be committed. Just as an example, I had an opportunity to talk to the head of preventive cardiology at the Cleveland Clinic, very famous MD, PhD, Stanley Hazen, who has transformed our understanding of the gut-heart connection by a chemical called TMAO. And he just published a paper just 6 weeks ago in a very large United States database: more red meat consumed, earlier cardiac conditions like heart attack, strokes, and earlier cardiac death. And how many times has that been published? The World Health Organization announced in October 2015, more processed red meat, more colorectal cancer. But there's even more of a weight of evidence, more red meat, particularly processed red meat. But actually, they used the term in this Cleveland Clinic paper, ASF, animal-sourced foods. Just add up all those animal foods you eat in a day. You can just correlate it with your risk of heart attack, bypass, stents, strokes, and early death. Just another paper came out, and it turns out that molecule Dr. Hazen identified, TMAO, which comes from meat and egg yolk, is about 10% of all cardiac disease. You can directly link, did I have a hummus wrap or a turkey wrap? You know, all you got to do is ask that one simple question. So the science is so fascinating. It's so plant-based. You know, show me a heart disease reversal ketogenic diet or paleo diet study that even, you know, is 1/10 the size of Dr. Ornish or Pritikin experience or Dr. Furman experience. It just doesn't exist.
Right.
We own the science. We just haven't won the public's attention completely. And it's food addiction, and it's food access, and it's food costs, and comfort with preparing a bean soup rather than bone broth, and, you know, things that can easily be.
And the intricate connections of that are important for people to know. So when you're eating plant-based and that diet is high in fiber, you're allowing that diversity of the microbiota to ferment that fiber to reduce the expression of things like TMA, which are then converted in the liver to TMAO. They need to understand that, you know, when you talk about those things, this is another place where that plant-based nutrition so vindicates, you know, the whole process of data collection, because it's so dramatically creating an environment, even in the gut, that will create a diversity that reduces the expression of TMAO. I find it interesting that vegans, for example, in some of the studies, the enzyme in the liver that makes the final conversion to the TMAO from TMA, it does not operate the same way. It's in lower quantities. It's not quite as effective in vegans, which means the transformation doesn't occur to create that atherosclerotic change on blood vessel walls or the increased risk of, you know, cardiovascular disease. With that in mind, let me ask you something, because I noticed that you're also into other lifestyle things, and I want to talk about what your take is on, you know, the importance of exercise in your practice. How do you deal with that with your people, and how do you see that in relationship to heart health?
Yeah, well, you know, there's no doubt, since Ken Cooper, medical doctor at the Cooper Clinic in Dallas, started writing about aerobics in the 1960s, and subsequent, you know, large databases from Harvard, that movement, whether it be simple movement like a Blue Zones movement, or whether it be a formal gym time and formal training for even more endurance exercise, anywhere you are in the spectrum is better than sitting. As we said, sitting is the new cancer, sitting is the new smoking, all these trite comments, but they do really make a point, and they are true. So I have to both educate my patients, and I educate them for my own life. I have a busy schedule. I have not figured out yet. I used to figure out how to get an hour a day in the gym, but I had to wake up at 4:30 and be there at 5 and get done by 6 and shower and get to the hospital or the office. I choose not to do that anymore. I choose not to take every morning and wake up at 4:30. It was just in the news. Mark Wahlberg used to wake up every day at 2:30 to go to the gym. Now he's waking up at 3:30. God bless him. He's a decade younger than me. At some point, he's going to make the decision I made, that 7.5 hours of sleep as a general goal is so valuable for heart, for brain, for weight, for stress, for energy, that you have to compromise. So when I'm really hitting it hard, 4 to 5 days a week in the office, I work out every day, 7 days a week, but I'm okay with 15 minutes. It might be a HIIT workout, and I teach my patients, your biggest impediment to a workout, if you don't have orthopedic back issues, is time. And just packing your bag, getting in the car, going to the gym, coming back home, unpacking, showering, it's hours. I mean, you literally can do a plank and do push-ups and do sit-ups and do squats and do, you know, crunches and get some bands and get a rebounder and, you know, maybe a bike or one piece of equipment. Get stuff at home And the intermittent training, the high heart rate, low heart rate, on and off, plenty of data. You can stay fit, you can have good cardiometabolic health, and really you can do a lot in 15 minutes that the person on the elliptical at the gym reading Men's Health magazine kind of at a moderate pace, you can get that done in 15 minutes. Now, you got to have good heart and good joints and the whole health package to do that. Walking, if you got nothing else you can do, take a walk. Take little exercise snacks, as they say. It's your lunch break, go up and down the stairs, 1 flight, 2 flights. If you got 4 flights, it's a great fitness test to see if you can go up 4 flights in 1 minute. That's some published research.
And then just add more movement. I mean, one of the directors of the World Health Organization came out and said, when you look at Americans today compared to, let's say, 30 years ago, we're using 600 calories less a day in our normal activities of daily living. Park the car further away, take the stairs. Those things all add up, and people need to know you don't have to have that heavy formal exercise regimen, because sometimes what happens is if you can't do that, then the mentality is I'm going to do nothing because I can't do that. And that's a big mistake, because they can just add movement. Let me ask you another piece that you brought up. We know that, we have a nation that's dealing with, a lot of mental health issues. And of course, chronic stress has become overwhelming in many people's lives. And the data of relating in mind body between stress and even cardiovascular disease, we know that when that stress of fight or flight is relentless, the cortisol increase can increase inflammation, which can alter certain white blood cells to turn into foam cells that begin to engulf cholesterol and play a role in plaque formation on the wall of blood vessels. So we know that stress can contribute to cardiovascular disease. How do you deal with that in your practice, or do you address that, or do you have people looking at ways to modify their stress response in terms of their overall health program?
Yeah, that was a beautiful, beautiful and accurate summary, and I can't say it better than that. But number one, it's a question we always talk about. What kind of stress in your life? How high do you rate them? And what are your coping mechanisms? Breath work is always a place to go to. It's easy to learn a 4-7-8 breathing pattern. Some people have adopted the crazy Wim Hof breathing pattern, but it's simple to do that. It's simple to learn a simple yoga routine. I teach my patients something called the 5 Tibetans. It takes about 10 minutes. It involves breathing. It's very relaxing. I've lately been, there's many apps, the Calm app, the blank on a few others that used to be so popular, Headspace app, of course. These are all available. Heart math. I'm a big fan of heart math. And if people listening are dealing with stress or learning issues or ADHD or PTSD, all the famous abbreviations, heart math is a simple app-based breathing apparatus, but there's a very special cable that clips on your earlobe and gives you instant biofeedback on your stress level, your heart rate variability, your skin temperature. It's fascinating, very simple to learn how to calm down 15 minutes twice a day. And lately, my latest thing is I've been using and teaching patients about vagal nerve stimulation, the longest nerve in the body from the brain down to the pelvis, runs right behind the left ear and to some degree the right ear. But I use a little device. It's called a Nuvana. I don't have any financial stake. Vagal nerve stimulator. It's like a little earpiece, and maybe 15 minutes twice a day. I've seen when I rate my sleep, sometimes I'll wear a sleep band or a sleep ring. My sleep has really improved in depth and all by using a tool, a technique. The simplest thing to do is breath work and mindfulness, And I think it all ultimately boils down to gratitude. If you can wake up in the morning and realize no matter what your pile of problems are, you woke up and you've got your breath and your eyesight and your smell and your taste and your mental faculties and some degree of body function, you're way ahead of the norm. And, you can't take it for granted. So if you work through your day with gratitude, the bumps in the road don't seem so, vicious.
And that's another piece too. There are data suggesting that just 10 to 12 minutes of stepping back from the chatter of our lives with some form of some stress response management is all you really need. Again, in the past, there'd be these long periods where people thought they had to commit to meditation. The point of breath is so powerful because it's the simplest thing we can do. It's the simplest thing we can follow. And the profundity of just working with breath, which is why many of these ancient systems of yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong and all of these systems of inner cultivation have always focused on breath work. So that's something that's so easy to work with and so easy to learn. And yes, with these apps that you're talking about, it is amazing because really one of the hallmarks of measuring stress was something called heart rate variability, which a lot of people don't know about, but it's really one of the best indicators of overwhelming stress in our lives. And now you've got these ways with these oral rings and so on, where you can actually have measurements of that and in a biofeedback way change that, which is really pretty profound when you think about it, because that's a very sophisticated measurement that now is accessible to people generally.
I agree. Again, you have summarized expertly and wonderfully.
I wanted to ask you about, give me your take on the one of the procedures that you do, and let the audience know the value of what you call that carotid intimal medial, thickness evaluation, and what it means and what it can do and what it can show people as they're evaluating their quality of health in life.
Yeah, we deal with cardiologists, cardiac experts, deal with the most serious and most common, medical problem there is, which is hardening the arteries, atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease. But we're not that precise about defining it, following it, tracking it. So your internist, your family doctor, might take out an online calculator and say, Bob or Mary, you're 55, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your C-reactive protein, your family history, your blood sugar. I think you have about a 10% risk of a heart attack in the next 10 years, and we need to make some changes. Well, that's all better than doing nothing, but it begs one very important missing piece, which is it doesn't actually look at arteries. And we don't actually know for sure if your arteries are youthful, your arteries are diseased. And there are two simple ways to find out if your arteries are youthful or your arteries are diseased. You mentioned one of them. You do a simple ultrasound of the neck called a carotid intimal medial thickness ultrasound, CIMT. 15 minutes, no radiation, painless. Anybody can go through it from an 18-year-old to an 88-year-old. And you can see plaque and you can measure the thickness of arteries. The bottom line is you get a concept called your arterial age. You're 60 years old, but your arteries are like an 80-year-old, you got a problem. You're 60-year-old and your arteries like a 60-year-old, okay, you can go to bed at night thinking, I'm all right. And if your arteries like a 50-year-old, you ought to write a book and teach people how to keep your arteries young. And then there are ways to do that also with heart arteries, and that usually involves CT imaging. So it's going to be a little more complex, a little bit of radiation exposure. You don't want to do that very often. But we have a breakthrough now called precision medicine. I want you to know exactly where you stand. And the sicker you are, the more we need to apply lifestyle medicine and track your plaque. And so we use the carotid every year to two, and we show people, good news, you made all those changes. Your diet's different. You're going to the gym, you're sleeping better. You've lost some weight and everything's going in the right direction. And look how much better your carotid arteries look. This is all backed in science, backed in 1,000+ publications. It's not as widely used. It's such a logical approach to the number one killer of men and women. Identify, measure, quantify, and then track it.
I'm here with Dr. Joel Kahn, a holistic plant-based cardiologist. Joel, where can people find you? Give us some insight as to how they can access your books, your information, or getting in touch with you. What website? Give us some information.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I do have a very active clinic in southeastern Michigan, suburb of Detroit, but I'm licensed all over the United States. So we do telemedicine throughout the United States and actually internationally. It's a small practice. It's a very high-touch practice, a lot of personal time. People can find me at a website, drjoelkahn.com, drjoelkahn.com. Take it in my books, take it in my clinic, take it in my podcast, articles that I've written, many, many articles. Yeah, I've written about 6 books, not about, but 6 books. So enjoy the academic, process of educating people, whether it's one-on-one in the clinic or whether it's through great activities and your great questions like we've had tonight.
And what does Dr. Joel do for fun?
That's a good question. I do work a lot. I have 3 grown children, 1 beautiful granddaughter. They are relatively close, 2 live in Detroit, 1 in New York. Spend a lot of time. Wonderful wife. I have 3 small rescue dogs at home. Totally keep me young and feeling grateful to be making a difference in their lives. I have an incredible 90-year-old mother, lives a couple blocks away. And then she's in southeastern Florida for the winter. So I spend a good amount of time with her. So I read a lot, but between practice, workouts, some creative efforts, I haven't yet painted, the Sistine Chapel. I'm waiting on my ability to do that.
How has your family embraced, the whole plant-based world and all of that?
Yeah, I met my wife in 5th grade, so pretty much anything I did, she did. Yeah, and she went to the same university, the same undergrad year, from the same religious background. So we've twinned our way through life very easily. She's a very good vegan chef and a nurse. 2 of the 3 kids are completely in the plant-based world and enjoy it. In fact, for about 5 years, I owned a restaurant in Detroit with my son. He's now in the baking industry, but we actually not just ate vegan food, we made 500 meals a night for the community. It was a huge, huge endeavor and very successful for a number of years. And then I have my one who challenges me. He's an incredible kid. He's a lawyer. He's very clean eater. He's in the gym every day, but he doesn't completely get the plant-based world yet. And, everybody's got family situations, so we love on him.
All you can do is lay it out. That's it. Everybody's got to embrace it in their own way. Do you have any final words or advice or that you'd like to share with the audience?
I just say this conversation is so critical. Heart disease remains 103 years in a row, then 104 now, actually, the #1 killer of men and women in the United States. It is a disease that is preventable if you start early enough in life and apply great lifestyle. And if you're listening in your 50s, 60s, 70s, reach out to your grandkids, reach out to your kids, get them on this National Heart Association and this whole Dr. Frank Sabatino, this whole program early in life, because you can actually prevent the disease if you start early. But if you're approaching this and you're starting in your 50s, 60s, 70s, you can detect the disease. Don't live in a bubble. Find out if you've got a problem or not. And the good news is you can reverse the disease. It takes time. You can't erase 40 years of cheeseburgers and malts, in 3 months. But this is a reversible disease. I see in my clinic all the time. And you have to apply advanced imaging and advanced lab work. But it boils down to largely, did you sleep well? Did you move well? Do you love well? And did you eat well? To quote the great Dean Ornish. So it's pretty simple in its final application.
I want to thank you very much for taking the time to share your words of wisdom and your time with us. I urge everybody out there, I encourage you to seek out Dr. Kahn. We're going to have his places where you can find him in our show notes, so they'll be available to you. And I encourage you to find him online and follow him. I also want to thank the listeners out there, because without you, none of this can happen. And on behalf of the National Health Association, I just want to really thank you for being part of this active community. I'm Dr. Frank Sabatino, your host for the Health Science Podcast, and I look forward to seeing you on the next show.
You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.